you. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Educational Affairs Committee meeting to order. We're going to begin the meeting with a roll call, starting with Mr. Riddell Williams.
Charles Riddell Williams, present.
Zachary Epps, present.
Jennifer Lemon, present.
Mia Blitzstein, present.
Liam Mulhern, present.
Caroline Watts, present. Robin Murphy, present.
Present from a safe distance.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Ross Whiting, present. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moves.
Second. Go ahead, you second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. The motion carries. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Pimental and Dr. Katrin-Bone, who will be leading the work this evening. Welcome, Dr. Pimental. Dr. Katrin-Bone.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone.
Good
Welcome
evening.
to Ed Affairs. And again, thank you to the board, visiting Ed Affairs, and to Dr. Whiting for presiding this evening. So starting with our essence, belonging, becoming, excelling. Our diversity gives us strength, but our essence defines our purpose, our why. It is what connects us physically and emotionally to a greater good. CSD is driving to provide a place where all belong, students, families, staff, and community, and where all can become the greatest version of themselves. And looking at our mission and vision, our mission, the mission of the Cheltenham School District is to provide inspiration and resources to every student to achieve academic excellence and pursue their highest potential by creating an equitable and inclusive community that fosters social and emotional well-being and a passion for learning. And our vision is to belong, engage, seek justice. Cheltenham School District is a community where all students know they belong, engage, and excel in their learning experience and are prepared to act as champions of social justice. This evening, we have two things on the agenda, which is to talk about gifted education, both identification and instruction, and then we'll also be reviewing special education with Dr. Katrin-Bone. So starting with gifted education identification, this is just a basic 101 in Chapter 16 of the Pennsylvania Code, which outlines gifted education and the rules of the road, so to speak. There is an equation. It's a two-part equation. The first is that a student has to have outstanding intellectual ability, and they also have to be in need of specially designed instruction. If they have these two things together, that meets the requirement that would result in them having a GIEP, or a gifted individualized education plan. And so the first part of this presentation is going to be looking at the first part of that equation, which is what do we mean when we say has outstanding intellectual ability? And what does that mean here in this district in terms of how we identify? So taking a little trip back in history, so to speak, to 2017, which is when we first started diving into this particular challenge. On the left, you can see a pie chart that represents the total district population by race in 2017. And on the right-hand side, you can see the gifted population at that time. And obviously, there is some stark differences between the left and the right-hand pie graphs, pointing to significant disproportionality in the way that we identify gifted students. And so this data in 2017 is what spearheaded our first round of efforts, so to speak, to start to solve this issue. When we talk about intellectually gifted, one framing to make some sense of it is that it's three interlocking parts or three equally sharing components, which is exceptional intelligence, divergent thinking, sometimes called creativity, and also task commitment. More specifically, when we talk about exceptional intelligence, that is generally a reference to IQ or intelligence quotient is what we're measuring or what we're talking about there. Divergent thinking is a set of characteristics, which you can see listed here, things like curiosity, imagination, open-mindedness, risk-taking. Some of that might sound like things that you would develop in a student, but from a gifted lens, we're talking about an innate capacity within those domains, as opposed to like something that you develop in a student through education or culture, et cetera. And then lastly, task commitment. The more recent jazzy term for this has been grit, but task commitment is an older psychology term, which means in some sense the opposite of divergent thinking. Instead of being able to sort of spread your mind out in many directions, it's being able to concentrate in and to accomplish a single task, and to demonstrate your ability to do that. So those three things together is what we need when we say that someone is intellectually gifted. Looking at our protocol back in 2017, what we discovered was, number one, we were not measuring divergent thinking in any meaningful way. As a side note, we're in good company because almost no school district measures divergent thinking in any meaningful way, but we also were not doing that. We were overemphasizing task commitment, which is to say that grades and sort of generalized opinions about the academic ability of a student is what was driving some of the decision making. And the way we looked at exceptional intelligence was through some broken systems. And so what we looked to do was by 2021, we had reworked this protocol and aligned it to best practices. And so you can see here a lot of those best practices, all of which are still in place. And some of the big shifts were we moved to the Naglieri as our general screening tool. Originally, that was the Naglieri nonverbal tool. We now use the Naglieri general abilities test, which is easy to get all that confused because it has similar names, same test creator. But we started piloting it with this year, this last school year, a different version of the Naglieri, but it's still in the same sort of theme of finding a more equitable way to identify students. We added the Torrance test of creative thinking. Very few districts nationwide do that. We're one of few, but it is an objective way to quantify divergent thinking. And it has proven itself to be a very good test from an equity perspective. And then, of course, we look at things around student performance, the most important one being computer adaptive assessments, because from a gifted lens, we want to go above grade level. And so on grade level material data does not really tell us much from a gifted perspective. And so that's sort of what that process looked like. And if we go back here, the left-hand graph is one that you saw just a few moments ago. That's that 2017 gifted data. And then the right-hand side is the May of 2025 gifted population by race for the district overall. One just asterisk is you'll notice that in our previous data, Black and multiracial were combined into a single group that had to do with data collection. We can now separate that out, which is why it looks different on the right. So the impact of implementing those best practices, the positive of that is we did double the identification of Black and brown students. So movement in the right direction for sure. However, I think if we were starting from the right, you'd still say, oh boy, we have a giant problem. So it's a better version of bad, but it's still not good. And that's sort of where we were as of May of this last year. So the challenge that we have now is that we're building the bridge that we're crossing. And the reason for that is largely that we've already implemented the off-the-shelf best practices. When people talk about best practices, we're doing them. We've been doing them since 2021. And it has made improvements, but it has not radically altered our situation. And so the challenge now is we have to be the ones to develop what people will in the future call best practices. But right now they're experimental practices. And that's where we are. And the reality is we shoulder the responsibility to solve that problem because of who Cheltenham is for so many reasons. So that's where we are in terms of process. So where we started with this, this was going back to about a year ago. We worked to create a new what we call a gifted evaluation discussion framework. And those words were chosen carefully. This is not a matrix. Many districts use a gifted matrix. And what it does is basically assign points for different things that you'd be looking for gifted. And matrices are associated with disproportionality. So this is not a matrix, it's a discussion framework. And the way that we created the discussion framework is we created a student population that had one student representing every single possible combination of scores. And that was a total population of about 72 billion students is what the math produces on that. So we started that with it as our model population and then doubled it. And the second group we put into it, we made the adjustment that we know that there is a certain amount of bias in some of the nationwide tests, for example, the WISC. And there's national data sets on what those biases are. So we created a second population group of the exact same size with a presumption of the national level difference in those outcomes. And then what we were able to do is run all 152 billion students through a variety of different potential discussion frameworks and to make adjustments to the framework so that it would produce as close to a proportional outcome as possible. So that's how we came to this particular discussion framework. Most of them are sort of just ad hoc, or you base it on whatever assessments you use. And so we're using Chapter 16, all available criteria that we have at hand. So we're playing by the rules, but also trying to use a computational method to produce an outcome that is proportional. And so that's how this framework was developed. And so that was sort of step one. In essence, we just reverse engineered it, is really probably all I needed to say. So then the second piece that we did is once we had that in hand, I set it and said that I wanted it to orient the discussion, quote unquote, that the framework orients into 4 different directions. So one that's academically oriented, one that was very IQ oriented, one that was very creativity oriented, and one that was very equity oriented. And then we could run students through those 4 different conversations to see what the framework itself would produce. And so we then went back and reread all of our gifted written reports from 2022 and compiled all of the data that comes out of those reports. They're about 20 pages long. It took myself and 2 secretaries the entire summer to read every single report, compile all into a giant spreadsheet. And then we ran each of those students using AI through these 4 different discussions. And what we looked to do was to see, does the AI say that this student is or is not gifted? And then we also know what we said. We said that the child is or is not gifted. And then the end result of that was a level of agreement or disagreement between what Cheltenham did and what 4 potential different conversations could have produced. And so that then color coded our spreadsheet. And so increasing depths of color means more disagreement between what Cheltenham actually did and what these discussions through this framework produced. And if the disagreement was that we said no, in real life, we said no, but there was a set of discussions are saying yes, then that became green. And the more disagreement there was, then the darker the green is. And if we said yes for a student, but the framework said no, and it said no repeatedly under 4 different criteria within the discussion framework, that's your darker and darker reds. So that's sort of the picture that it created. And so then when we sorted by disagreement, it basically produced, this is not the whole list, this is just kind of what I could capture in a quick screenshot, but it produces a list that can sort of point us to like, well, who are we saying yes to who we should not have, and who are we saying no to who we should have said yes to. And we can then again, using AI, back map it and say what criteria is being used for these different groups, just based on the data that's here, not based on our criteria or the framework, just use the data here and reinvent our own thing. And it could tell us that we were actually using differentials in how we were making decisions. So that's sort of the system that we used to help us figure this out. And what this really comes down to is 2 big outcomes from this. The first is that, and in some sense, we are in common company, quote unquote, good company, in that our under-identification of Black and brown students is a part of that national issue of disproportionality. And it's one of the reasons why there was actually a lot fewer of those particular cases through the use of the framework. And so that's its own side problem. And sort of that is the perennial problem, that is the ongoing problem, and the one that we have to keep working to solve. That is separate from another problem, which is the over-identification of white students, which is not a national problem. That is a unique problem to Cheltenham. And sort of the litmus test there is if you go to a vastly majority white suburban school district and you were to look at what percentage of your student body is gifted, their answer will be somewhere between 6 and 11%. That's the state sort of window. And so if you turn the clock back to 2017, we were saying it was close to 40% of white students were gifted. So that's not an issue of assessment criteria problems. Like that's a that's not part of the disproportionality challenge that everyone has. That is a problem in the way that we are making identification decisions, et cetera. So it's important to differentiate these two things. There's two problems. First, solve the white over identification problem. And then 7, we have to chip away at the more long-standing and harder to get a crowbar underneath problem, which is Black and brown under identification. So that should sort of create the frame for kind of where we're at and where we've gone. And so this produced some changes in addition to what we had changed previously. All decisions are now run through a gifted multidisciplinary team. There were decisions being made by single individuals in the past, which can, we've identified as creative problems. So everything is now team-based. No decisions are made about other people at the table. And then all of those decisions are again run through the same AI simulation that we already created, just as a check to say, and it is possible that there can be 4 disagreements and you still stick to your guns because you've got reasons. But that way you're at least looking at something saying, hang on a second, like we came to this determination, but for some reason this isn't matching up. Let's dive in, or are we sticking with what we said, or maybe we over or undervalue certain things. We're going to continue to refine that new discussion framework, and all gifted evaluations must receive a full cognitive evaluation. It is possible to give the WISC as a truncated test. That is a valid use of the WISC. However, we found that there were some patterns in when that was and wasn't being used, and we wanted the maximal amount of subscores to be able to make a richer decision. And so all gifted evaluations must have the full assessment moving forward. And so we've been implementing that since the beginning of this school year. On the left here is the February 2026, right now, total district population is on the left. On the right, some caveats before I share the data. This is sort of influx, obviously. It's from September to now. There's lots of paperwork that gets backlogged. You have to wait till certain things come in. And so right now we've assessed just short of 30 students. 14 of those, so approximately half, have been found to be gifted. We still have 80 to go before the end of the year. So this is highly preliminary data, but we're just trying to see, can we see something, basically. And so when you take a look at the data that this is producing, it's obviously much closer to what we would want to see. It is actually technically overrepresenting Black and brown students by some small percentages. Again, there's a lot of assessments to go yet. And if you'll notice that there's no Asian, Hispanic, or multiracial students, that's just coincidence because it's a small N count. But certainly we will have all student groups identified by the end of the year. So that's where we are in terms of identification, how these shifts have panned out so far. Again, this is very, very early, very small N count. So it's not a victory lap by any means, but it's an indication that these changes and what we've done have produced positive outcomes. Changing gears to the other side of the equation.
Why don't we pause there just
Sure.
for a second, just knowing our board. I think there's some things they might want to unpack.
Sure.
Thank you.
Questions and comments from board members? Mr. Bedell. Congratulations.
I'll take that.
My mom wishes too. Okay, vaccine science is still fun. Just a good clarifying question just related to the data. Just one of the patterns that were identified for me was that there were in the chart where we had showing our patterns, that there were a number of 0 values. And I'm just curious about the consistency of the 0 values across the entirety of the data set, because if I were looking at it and I saw a 0 value, the first thing that would come to mind for me is incomplete evaluation. Mm-hmm. And so I would then logically devalue that. So I'm just curious, 2 questions. One, how much does that impact our demographic here that's identified as either over or underrepresented? And then how persistent are the 0 values? Are most of our students have a score in every column? Are we looking at, and does that define a complete evaluation?
So some of the 0 values, it depends on the column, to be honest. So there are, if you're looking at the left-hand column, that's the Naglieri. Right. So that's a screening tool. So there are instances where we would skip the screener.
Okay.
So there's valid reasons why that would just be jumped over as one example. There are examples, some of the right-hand columns are like the furthest right-hand column is an example of that truncated assessment.
Okay.
So when you give the truncated assessment, you get no value in that outer column. So you can like literally see like this kid got a full assessment, this child so you can see who did and didn't get the full assessments from that column. So in that column, that's the reason why. In other cases, some of it was limited information in the gifted written reports that we had. So some of that, it is not a perfect data set.
Okay.
Because like we're sort of sifting through the ashes or something I had put up there as like a tagline for what we were doing there.
Okay.
But generally speaking, we have a pretty good data set for the vast majority of students.
Okay, because yeah, that and I guess that's what I think is for me when we're thinking about equity, but also thinking about being able to evaluate the whole student. I think there's an aspect of it that would require, for me, and I'm just thinking at this, challenging in a way, that we would want to have a full data set.
Yeah.
And so that if in fact we don't, is that a reason for us to want to seek that data set? Like, do we want to go get that? Like,
Let me jump in, Dr. P, just real quick. So what this is here is really a baseline, right? And based on this baseline are some of the upgrades that we did that Dr. P explained in the latter slide. So in the framework of continuous improvement, that data set will improve because there's upgrades that we've made that are not going to give us a zero outcome.
Okay, so we will be looking at, because like, I guess if I could clarify one final question, because I don't want to take up too much time, is just expectation is that we do have a full data set, because that in and of itself entails that we completed a full evaluation.
Yeah, so for example, like I just realized there's like another example, which is that we piloted a different cognitive assessment last year, which is the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, the KABC. It's an alternative to the WISC. And so for those students, it doesn't produce the same sub-scores, but it does produce an IQ score.
Okay.
And so we didn't want to mix and match things that weren't true. So like in some of these, it's because that child received the KABC. We have an IQ score, but it doesn't create a verbal it doesn't create the same, those sub-scores are not comparable to a WISC. So it's better as a 0, but there's an IQ present because that's a KBC score. So again, we knew going into this that this data set was not a perfectly clean data set, but it was the closest thing that we had to work with.
Currently, okay.
Yeah.
And then forward thinking.
Yes.
What we're
yes, because I don't ever want to go back and read this report again. We have a new internal process where there's a rich spreadsheet dashboard that we create for every student who's being assessed, and we're infilling it in real time. And it's basically like a much better version of this, and that we can go through for each and every student. And we as a team sit together every week and go through every student who's being assessed. Like, why is this missing? And because it's other stuff too, like a classic one is like a parent won't send in a parent input form.
okay.
And so at some point in the past, the professionals were like, well, we just never got it. We got to move on. This way, it's a lot easier to flag.
Okay.
And we can start calling the parents and doing everything we can to get all those little pieces of data in. Yeah.
Got it. So that continues. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Just looking at the current data and just forward thinking, what are we doing?
Sure.
So, thank you. Appreciate that.
Ms. Muller.
Follow up to that, I think you may have said this, Dr. Pimental, my apologies. To that end of like the full data set, the Naglieri, this universal screener used for second grade students, correct?
We give it in the spring of second grade.
That's
right. Yes.
So someone may ask for their child to be evaluated for gifted education prior to that time.
Yes.
So that student will not have the Naglieri, or do we give it to someone in that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the Naglieri serves two functions.
Okay.
So it's our universal screening tool. So every student in second grade takes
Right.
it. And even if the parents never thought about gifted, if they come up through that, then we would recommend a full evaluation. Also, any parent who recommends that their child may be gifted starts with the Naglieri, which we also use as a screener. If they don't pass through the Naglieri, then we let the parents know that they didn't pass through the screener and that there's really no reason to continue with
Perfect,
testing.
thank you.
Dr. Watts.
In the process of doing this review, did you identify any students, it sounds like you identified students who should have been identified, as well as students who should not have been. Did you reassess any of this placement?
Yes, every student who any student for whom 3 or 4 times we said no. But our process said yes. We reevaluated all those students, and I say that in lowercase letters, meaning we went back and reread the gifted written report, looked at the data that we had already. And if it was clear that under this new lens, we would have gone another way, we issued those students GIPs without a formal full reevaluation. We used the data we had. So
Right.
because the alternative to that was going to take months to be able to
So,
put them into the whole testing cycle. And the decision was like, are we going to do that? Or are we going to use the data we have that's valid? And this kid would be gifted now anyway. So let's give them the
so
GIP.
you gave students services that you had previously said they were not eligible.
Correct.
Did you do the reverse?
No. No, we have not gone and revoked GIPs.
Their board questions and comments. Sloman.
First of all, thank you for this. It's very interesting. Appreciate all the effort and the review of documents. And also very appreciative to hear that we are having the gifted multidisciplinary team meetings for all students. That is a huge step in the right direction. As a parent who had a kid who was evaluated, and I say that very loosely, evaluated by one person. And also doing a full cognitive evaluation, because that was also our experience, was to have a very truncated cognitive evaluation. So I appreciate all of those new steps. I am trying to make sure I understand our process though. So if I were like, my kid was in 3rd grade, we go through the screener, my kid isn't identified, but then come 4th grade and I think, really want to have a full gifted evaluation. If a parent asks for a gifted evaluation, even if their child was not previously flagged by the screener, what happens then?
They go through the exact same process.
Okay.
So and it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be a parent, it could be a teacher, an administrator. If anyone flags the NTSS can flag a student and as recommended potentially for gifted. And once that starts, it's the same process for everybody.
Okay.
The only difference is if you're identified in 2nd grade through the screener, then you're obviously not going to take the screener again.
Right. Okay.
So you're kind of jumping into phase 2, so to speak.
And phase 2 then is the full evaluation, the whole 9 yards kind of.
I guess there's actually sort of 3 phases. So phase 1 would be the Naglieri as sort of the first layer. And part of that is to prevent an unnecessary amount of testing on students who just don't need it. Because people think my child might be gifted, but there isn't really an indication there. But we want to check it to make sure. So it kind of plays 2 roles. The second phase is where we're looking at all of the things other than the psychologist administered assessment. So that's a review. That's where they take the Torrance test of creative thinking. That's when we look at all of their academic performance data. We look at the teacher input, their rate and retention data, acquisition and retention data, as well as, I forget if I said teacher input forms, and then also kind of have a round robin around that student. And then the 3rd phase is the psychologist administered cognitive assessment.
Other board comments and questions?
Thanks. Also appreciate the continuity in the conversations that we've heard over the last few years and how this has developed. Also, I think back to like the 16, 17 audit that was performed, that probably speaks to a lot of the themes that confirmations we're getting in the data that you're looking at. And so just for clarity, the best practices that the district's been implementing for the last few years, that speaks directly to identification, or also like the second half of the presentation, like around what happens next, or
The best practices in this case are pointing at the identification. point, yes. Yeah.
And then I assume that largely is to the first category around the nationwide, or are there? And then we're still trying to figure out what to do about number 2, or can you kind of elaborate on that?
So number 2, really the issue is putting in place the practices that are making sure that the criteria that is put forward is applied evenly for every single student. That's really, it's in some sense as simple as that.
Okay.
Because, other districts don't have that problem. So the good news about that problem is that it's easily solved.
Okay. So then when you're talking about the creation of new best standards, I think
Yes,
can you
that
elaborate
really
on
looking at
what-
identifying Black and brown students.
Okay,
That's
got it.
that's where there's no easy solutions.
Okay, that helps clear it up. And then I get more of a meta question that doesn't need to be answered tonight, but more around the use of artificial intelligence, sort of broadly described here. And so, like, what was from what I hear, it sounds like there was the analysis performed by humans, in this case, school district employee humans, around like what decisions should be changed. And then there was the model that was built in AI that also said, okay, like you probably like these decisions could have been changed. So like, was there then a merging of like when you actually went to identify like who to the offer GIP? Like where was the crossover, if any, like in terms of what the AI said and what like you also use it to make the decisions in certain cases?
No, the AI is like, I would describe at this point, the way we used it, it's a kind of it's a sledgehammer. It's a very rough tool. It's like, it literally makes something a bright color. You're like, oh, it's a bright color. Let me go look at why it's bright, And then at that point, it can't really help. And you have to be the professional who understands the law and the children, and it's the humans who are making the decisions. But the AI is a very powerful tool to be able to look at a huge set of data points and to try to make some sense of it, or to provide patterns and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I appreciate you saying that, partially for the record, because that was my assumption, and so I don't want that to be assumed. But then also it kind of just speaks to, I think, some conversations that are happening at the policy level, where we don't have, once I think some things are in place, we don't have to make certain assumptions, because it'll be a matter of policy that we are using AI. I'll pause there, because this isn't a policy.
Other board comments and questions? In the interest of making the implicit explicit, this process that was undertaken is what equity looks like. It is when you examine your internal systems and processes, identify inequity within them, and then work to correct it. And this is a difficult process to do because we've been talking about equity in the school district for 9 years. I've been here for 9 years. I know we have. But the fact that we're coming to the point where we have over time demonstrated some improvement in 2021 and then hopefully great improvement now, we will be paying attention to the data, and I know all of you will as well, is a testament to shining a flashlight on systems of inequity within our district so we can reveal where there are challenges and address them critically and directly. And so just for everyone here, yes, the data we saw in 2017 looks bad. 2021 data looks bad, right? But what we're seeing now is a real attempt to correct the challenges within both the bias testing system and our own inequitable distribution of students in the gifted education program. And so I just wanted to flag that and say thank you to the administration for being brave enough to look at data that can be revealing in ways that could be, if you did not own it and move forward, not great for us. And so thank you for doing this work and for paying attention to it. Public comments and questions. So I'm going to take public comments and questions online and in person. If you have a comment or question, please state your name, where you reside in the township, and then feel free to ask your question or comment, provide your comment. And Jackson. All participants. I see no hands there.
Nope. No hands.
Sure. Name and where you reside in the township.
Hi guys, my name is Esther Isaac. I live in Building Park. And my question has to do with the NAGLI area exam. Is that one administered to children in the autistic supports program as well? Or is it for second graders that, it's just that every second grader has one? Is it designed for just second graders who are not
No,
outside of autistic?
every student, except for a few rare cases, take the Naglieri.
Thank you, Esther. Any other public comments or questions? Thank you.
All right, so second half here, look at the second half of the equation. At the programming side of things, which is the need for specially designed instruction. From chapter 16, specially designed instruction includes adaptations or modifications to the general curriculum. Just one point of reference, Pennsylvania has a gifted education program. We do not have a gifted and talented program. Other states have gifted and talented programs. Talented is, technically speaking, talented refers to things like music, the arts, dance, etc. Gifted education is academics. And so Pennsylvania is an academic only state. We don't have the other side of that equation in the way that our law is structured. And just some terms, because they come up a lot in gifted and they're often used sort of in an unprecise way, but for this part of the presentation, we have to use them precisely. There are really two ways that we can provide services for a student who has a GIEP. And the two ways are either enrichment or acceleration. And enrichment means that you stay with on grade level standards and you drill down deeper into what those standards mean or what they do or how to approach and to work with those concepts, etc. But you're still in lockstep with the students who are at your grade level. Acceleration is where you're moving faster through the content, but you are not going any deeper than any other students who are going through that same content who are older than the student who's being accelerated. So the only difference is the student's age. But they're not receiving deeper lessons. They're just getting the same old thing that everybody else is, just faster. So it's a question of speed or depth. And when we provide gifted services, you're going one direction or the other, and the two don't really play together very well. That doesn't mean you can't provide acceleration and enrichment, but those are two different things that you are providing. There isn't accelerachment or something like that. The two don't go together. So there are, at this particular time, this is a seminal research paper. It's also in the appendix for those who want to see it. And this puts forward that there are essentially three paradigms for how to provide for gifted children. And the three basic paradigms, there's the oldest one, which is the gifted child paradigm. And that is essentially this idea that giftedness is this sort of innate trait. It's its own thing. It's the classic old like bumper sticker that says like my child's gifted, in XYZ child in the school district or whatever. So it's this notion, it's just its own thing. Then another sort of newer paradigm is the idea of the differentiation paradigm, which is trying to get away from the gifted child paradigm and saying there are specific areas of academic aptitude that different children have. You have to provide for those areas of aptitude. And so it has to be targeted academic support, essentially. And then the third one is the talent development paradigm. And that's where we talk about growing advanced cognitive performance. So actually doing things that improve the way in which students' brains and cognitive abilities actually function and having an educational experience designed to do that. And its focus is on depth of understanding and what they call non-academic skill acquisition. So that's all the stuff that's not on the PSSA. Collaboration, problem solving, thinking outside the box, thinking inside the box, all of those kinds of things. That's what the talent development paradigm presumes that and tries to work forward from there. And so if you take a look at this brief graph here, the columns represent the three paradigms, and then the rows represent the three big buckets of things that every school district does, which is we identify students, we provide enrichment, and we provide differentiation. And so, acceleration. And so you can see here in Cheltenham, one of the challenges is that Chapter 16 was written in the gifted child paradigm. And so the law assumes one paradigm because it was written in 1968. And it's been updated, but it still has its philosophical underpinnings are there. And so we identify students using that because it's the rules of the road. And then when we look at how we provide enrichment and how we provide differentiation, we are working in different paradigms than Chapter 16 is necessarily written in. So that does create some tension between how Chapter 16 is presented and how we provide services around these things. And obviously there's lots of individualization and we can pivot and all those kinds of things for individual students, but that's kind of where we sit. And so this is kind of important to understand how we proceed when we look at how we provide our services. So just some brief words about acceleration. We use that differentiated approach. We're looking at students, where's your academic ability? If it cannot be met at the grade level, going deeper into content is the wrong thing for this particular child. You can't go deep enough for this particular child. The next option is acceleration, move forward. If that is in one subject area, a student wants to subject area accelerate, as it's called, in math only, we will do that. If it's 2 subjects, it's 2 subjects. If it's full grade, it's full grade. If it's multiple grades, we will skip multiple grades. And we have done that. We've had students who've skipped many grades, actually, legitimate Doogie Howser kind of situations. So that's there. There are 2 things to keep in mind. One is that a lot of the research around this is captured in a book called A Nation Empowered, and it is repeated and truncated. You can read a much shorter version, which is on the National Association of Gifted Children's website. It's their policy statement on acceleration. And what these people argue very strongly for is that the benefits of acceleration outweigh the risks or outweigh the negatives. And they go very far in their research to make that claim. As a district, we don't follow with that lockstep. We try to educate parents, let them know all the potential options, what the effects might be if acceleration is the direction we go. But at the end of the day, it's a deeply personal decision between the family looking at their child. Do you want to accept the trade-offs and the negatives in order to get the benefits? How do you feel you know your child better than anybody? So we don't take a strong position, but we do try to educate parents to say there is research out there that suggests that the benefits outweigh the negatives. But it's ultimately up to each person to decide. And then when we look at the enrichment side of the equation, this is showing our K through 12 continuum of services. K through 8, it's essentially project-based learning is how we deliver enrichment. That is the mode or the instructional methodology by which it's delivered. And then I'll talk a little more in detail about the high school, where we look at some particular course sequences that we've put into place in the last year or so. Just very briefly, when we talk about the project-based learning piece, 2 things. Number 1, we have built these projects around the high-tech high project planning methodology, which you can see on the left. We use their design kaleidoscope, as they call it. That's how we built the projects. And then the other piece to know, you can see here that every one of the projects has content standards built into each project. And those content standards are grade level based, and they drill into different subject areas depending on the project. So all projects are standards aligned. Talking about the high school, the way that it works now is students entering into 9th grade are rostered into AP seminar. And then following AP seminar in 10th grade is AP research. AP seminar and AP research are sometimes referred to as the non-AP AP classes. And what they mean is that they're project-based. They're much more about independent student thinking. They're sort of unlike your traditional, AP US history, where it's like, read the bigger, thicker book faster and take a big test on it. These classes are more about developing projects, developing real research. So they are very project-based in their orientation. So it's perfect coming after K through 8 of project-based learning for the gifted students. And then if students get all the way through AP research, it sets them up to possibly receive the AP capstone diploma, which is a sort of feather in the cap that those students can have. Keep in mind that a gifted student cannot put that they are gifted on a college transcript. That is not an eligible criteria for college entrance. But this is something that we can offer this group of students. If they complete these 2 courses plus 4 more AP courses and take the exams, they can get the AP capstone diploma. So this is sort of something that we can offer for their hard work and their efforts. Taking these courses as pretty young students to take AP seminar at 9th grade is an acceleration technically. And then that leads into our independent project course at the high school, which previously was in 9th grade. And the challenge that we found with it was the leap from 8th grade to 9th grade was too much. It was just too big of a jump for 9th grade students. their perception of the openness of the class was that it had a lack of rigor. That's kind of how it was interpreted. And it is a big jump for students who live in an education system to be put in a place where it's like, what do you want to work on? What do you want to pursue? Let me create the time and the space for that. And then they're like, okay, but nobody's making me do anything. Right? It's like, well, you're kind of doing as much with it as you can. The idea here is that the teacher who's teaching this is the same teacher. And so they will develop a muscle in AP Seminar and AP Research that has a lot of automatic built-in rigor because they're AP courses. And that then the following year, they come into the independent project course, same teacher who can then leverage that cultural norm that they built in that classroom to deliver the rigor that we feel like was missing when it was in ninth grade. So that's basically the setup for the most part for the high school.
Thank you. Thank you. Board questions and comments? Let's see.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. It's not a question, it's just a comment, which is to say, I really appreciate you looking at the high school protocol. I mean, I'm not using the right word, but the development of skills and reworking where they build their independence and when and how. Because yeah, I think that it was a little bit too much independence too soon, and they weren't making the most, at least in my experience, making the most of the opportunity to do an independent project, but with some underlying skills, I think they would be more equipped. And also, you know, for the same reason that I like to advocate for a gap year, the more mature you are and the more experiences you have, the more focused your learning can be. And so it's like, if you know what you want studied, you know what you want to deep dive in. If you don't, you don't know what you don't know. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pimental. Question following up, talking about high school still. So using, I know in the past, like this is new, kind of using those two AP courses and moving the independent study, and it makes a lot of sense for the reasons Ms. Felicity just shared, and that you did as well. So if I'm remembering correctly from how we did it in the past, it's not required that a student with a GIP take these courses.
It's not required that they take the courses.
It's how we are meeting the need of the GIP by creating these opportunities, as well as a wide breadth of other opportunities with super rigorous coursework, things like that. Thank you. And then can students without GIEP still take, I don't know if that's a question for you or not, but still take AP Seminar and AP, Dr. Savage is shaking her head. Yes, I'm curious.
Yes, so the specially designed instruction, the accommodation is that it's an acceleration. So the lining up of having the course in 9th and 10th grade, that is only gifted students are in those grades taking those courses. So if there's any other students taking the courses, it's in a later part of their high school career.
Okay.
Now, as of right now, like this last year, we had AP Seminar was the first year for AP Seminar. And there's only gifted students in that class. Next year will be the first year for AP Research, and there will only be gifted kids in that class because you have to take AP Seminar to take AP Research. And then it's going to be, like AP Seminar could be opened up to other students who are not 9th graders who might want to consider the course.
From what I understand, I think they actually opened it up in the course request for the first one, AP Seminar this year for the 11th and 12th grade.
Yep.
We're actually in that process right now at the high school. All the course requests are going in, so we're getting ready we're taking a look now to see where all of this has landed. But we did a rewrite of the high school course catalog this year, where AP Seminar and AP Research, along with the independent study, actually now appear. And we categorized it both under gifted, but also as part of the AP. There's like a certificate. What's it called, Matt?
Of just those two courses, that one is called the AP Seminar and Research.
There you go. So we wanted to make the certificate available to the students, whether they were gifted or not. It's just a matter of when in your high school career you take it. Because it's acceleration for gifted, most of our students typically will take it in 11th and 12th grade if they so choose.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually wasn't sure if I had a question, but.
Oh, sorry. Not too cute.
But I
I actually do have a question, and I'm not even back. This may be in like one of the earlier pie charts, so I'm sorry if I missed it. Like, how many students do we currently have with GIEPs?
Oh, total number?
Yeah.
I don't want to say the wrong number, but it's always in the 300s.
All right, okay. And
District-wide.
District-wide, yeah.
okay. And are we looking also like at elementary schools, sort of do some sort of trends by building, if you will? Like, do some tend to have more kids or
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Okay,
Other board comments or questions?
I did actually have one more.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But and maybe we can take this offline, but I'm still trying to understand, like, I'm quoting from chapter 16 regulations now, 22 PA code, chapter 16.22C. Parents who suspect that their child is gifted may request a gifted multidisciplinary evaluation of their child at any time with a limit of 1 request per school term. The request must be in writing. The district shall make the permission to evaluate form readily available for that purpose. So if you have a parent who comes in and requests a gifted multidisciplinary evaluation, assuming they haven't already requested one that term, they made their request in writing. What happens? Is the child given the Naglieri? Are they given a full multidisciplinary evaluation? Like what?
The first thing that happens is they're given the Naglieri.
Okay.
And there's actually a few stop points on that. So because the Naglieri that we're now using, the Naglieri General Abilities Test is 3 different subtests. So it's in and of itself, it's pretty rigorous testing. And so we start with the nonverbal. And if they score below the 50th percentile, then we basically send a letter at that point saying your child scored below the 50th percentile on the Naglieri nonverbal. We don't recommend further testing. And again, that's just to avoid over testing children for no reason. If they score above it, then we give the quantitative and the verbal of the Naglieri. And then there's thresholds there too for what qualifies us recommending that we move on or suggesting that there's no data to recommend moving forward.
I understand a lot. I appreciate that. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm a parent and I request a full multidisciplinary evaluation, being given one subtest does not necessarily, I would argue, constitute a full multidisciplinary evaluation. Don't know if that is true or
Well,
not.
Well, because when we think about what it means to provide a multidisciplinary evaluation for a child, the Naglieri and all of these subtests become one data point that we actually look at. Typically what happens is, and this goes for special education as well, the request comes to the multidisciplinary team through the MTSS process, because in the MTSS process, we do give the Naglieri, but we also do a workup and we look at all of the data that's available in Lincoln. And we oftentimes, you will find, and I'm going to say that there are some children that even though they may not place in that 50th percentile or above on the Naglieri, if we have students that actually demonstrate through looking at all of these different batteries that we have, because there's a lot of different ways to identify giftedness, then it might be that, even though they haven't necessarily gotten above that 50th percentile, in extreme circumstances, they might go through the process anyway. So I'll give you a good example. There might be a student that didn't do well on the Naglieri, but on the fast bridge, we see that they are no risk at all, and they have on that bell curve placed at a 99%. Then we have a huge discrepancy between the 2 assessments, and we have to do additional assessments to determine whether or not one assessment is completely off or the other assessment is, it's the same thing that we're going through with the algebra piece right now, because at times we're having students that are getting straight B's in algebra, and then they're advanced on the PSSA and their scaled cut score puts them at the 99th percentile. Is that a kid issue or is that a teaching issue? So there's a lot of things that go into this. And as we're starting to lean heavily into the MTSS piece, and we're floating through buildings and building dashboards and having data conversations with teachers, we're starting to look at not just one data point, but multiple data points.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was looking for multiple data points.
Because and every once in a while we get a parent that might request just because a kid is gifted in music. The PA code, chapter 16, is very interesting because traditionally it was all based upon that IQ score, but when you look at chapter 16 itself, it actually does provide that you can qualify students for giftedness for things beyond that IQ score. I think a lot of school districts leaned into the IQ score piece particularly because it's an easy breakpoint and metric. I was in Lower Merion when we started using the Naglieri in 2000, I want to say 12, 13, and we actually brought it on because we wanted an assessment that would not screen as many children out, because I know there's quite a bit of research around some of the full scale IQ tests having implicit bias baked right in, and Naglieri had the least of that. So, this is going to continue to be an evolving piece as we are really looking at removing these barriers so that we can include more and more kids and serve them better.
Thank you.
Tap back out and slap back. There's somebody on.
Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. I have a question around acceleration, and I see, I know it's individual students make the determination, but there's also our approach as data informs and provides targeted supports. And I would like to better understand for parents listening who may have gone to an IEP, a GIEP interview, how does that actually look in that meeting? Like how does the district determine whether they're going to recommend acceleration for an individual student? Is it, hey, this student is pinning the top of all the charts for their grade level at the elementary level? And how would a parent look into that or understand that decision for their kid?
If either the parent suggests that they want their child to be accelerated, or if the MTSS team or a teacher looks at a particular student and says, we think that the student is a good candidate or acceleration might be the right thing, then the next step is we use something called the Iowa scale. It is not an assessment. It is not another test. It's just a way of pulling all the data together. It also includes a student interview. It includes talking to the parents. It's just a framework that gives a rough score of like not recommended, somewhat recommended, highly recommended for acceleration. And it's a way to have a structured conversation. That's really the grounds. I mean, pretty much every district that does acceleration uses the Iowa scale as their benchmark for how to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it strikes me that within this presentation, there's two halves to, and it's been broken into the two halves. So on the one hand, we are trying to improve our identification mechanisms, and on the other hand, we are trying to be very strategic and intentional about for those who have a GIEP, making sure it's as rich of an experience as possible and meeting the needs of those students. And I'm very glad we're having both those conversations. I'm glad we're at a point as a district where we now can start to have that second conversation again, through an equity, with the equity lens as well. And I look forward to continuing to hear updates on it. Thanks.
At this time, I'll take public comment and questions related to this portion of the presentation. I see one little red dot there. Work. All right, anybody in the room?
Or over on the right at the top, where it says more.
You want to read that? Please read it.
Let's see. This is from Johnson Starlita. For A's students who are not in the gifted program, are they allowed to take AP courses?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we're just over here.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson.
100%.
Yes.
And Phillips again.
Mr. Schultz.
Sorry, and I apologize. I just a thought crystallized that didn't crystallize when I first started talking, and it is really about, and I'll be straightforward. As a parent of a gifted student walking into an IEP meeting, I have no idea what resources are actually available to my student, and so to my kid. I imagine I'm not alone, and that to me is, I think, actually what I'm getting at when I talk about equity, that we have different parents coming in with different sets of backgrounds and experiences around what to expect from a GIEP. And so a parent might not even think to ask about acceleration. Like I wouldn't have thought to ask about acceleration necessarily. Although I guess I probably would have, having sat in these meetings. But I just wanted to just highlight that from that equity lens of like, hey, students are in there. We want to make sure that we're not similar how we don't want to rely on parent advocacy to being identified for gifted services. I don't think we want to be relying on parent advocacy for making sure that those services are best suited to the student. And I know we're not relying. I know we have a lot of really great district advocates in that room, but as just wanted to flag that as an opportunity for making sure no students' needs fall through the cracks in those meetings, whether that's through good information that parents can get around like higher level framework of here's what a GIP actually means for like training the parents to be the best advocates they can be. I just wanted to flag that. That's all.
And as I am moving now into this role, I have been thinking very succinctly about almost like a parent university and opportunities for parents to come in and get information around certain things. We do have an intervention manual, which right now speaks to not just intervention, but also enrichment that is available internally to our staff, but is not widely available to families. They're also on the district website now is an education blueprint, which actually has course descriptions for every class course that we offer K to 12 for the district. We are looking at also dashboards in terms of data dashboards. And I think part of it is exactly as Mr. Schultz has suggested, it's like, where are we putting the information and is the information being put in places and in realms where families can easily access it and then digest it. I think it's the digestion point that we have to think about. So obviously, we also make these presentations available through the Ed Affairs, website on the landing page on the website. So duly noted, and I think that there should be more opportunities, and there will be more opportunities for families to really come and ask questions, have conversations with teachers. A lot of the elementary schools do a math night and a reading night, for example. What would it look like to do an intervention and a extension night, right? So some of it is just about us being innovative around how we think about this, and then, being available as resources for families.
Thank you, Dr. Sash.
Hi.
Name and where you reside.
Yes, Lisa Hessbacher, I reside in Wakefield. So my question is around 2E students. Can you first of all explain what 2E means? And then how a 2E student would be identified and how many we actually have in district this year?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so we have 3E students too. So 2E means twice exceptional, 3E means thrice exceptional. And sometimes we have students that are duly identified. So the student might actually have a disability under the IDEA that falls within one of the 13 disability classifications, but they might be gifted as well. And in Pennsylvania, what we do as a district then is proceed through the normal IEP process, but within the IEP, we embed the gifted goals into the IEP. So you will see that a student has an IEP that addresses the gifted goals. And there is actually a section already built into our IEP forms for that purpose for students that are twice or thrice exceptional. So that becomes part of the IEP process. And oftentimes what we see is the giftedness will manifest through the evaluation or the reevaluation that the student typically goes through to be identified for special education. And we do our best to make sure that students that have both exceptionalities are addressed in both ways. It is not unusual for us, especially at the high school level, to see students that might be on the spectrum that are in all AP classes, just blow things out. And, we absolutely try our hardest to make sure that students are given more inclusive access, I think, across the board in special ed, but especially when you have that exceptionality.
And so can you give an example of like twice exceptional, thrice exceptional?
Mm-hmm. Twice exceptional would be a student, for example, whose primary disability is autism, but we see that they are also gifted based upon their IQ. Or you might see sometimes like you have a student that might be on the spectrum, but they also have other health impairment because they have a medical issue that we have to, support them with, and they're gifted as well. we try and address every aspect of students' need, whether it is, disability or giftedness or whatever it is. We build plans for kids.
Thank you. And then the number.
The number I will have to actually ask Dr. Cat about, because we're gonna have to do a cross check in IEP writer to pull that number out, because I don't think we actually put that into.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, we didn't put twice or thrice exceptional into the actual data that you're gonna see from the special ed team, but we can find that data.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Watts.
Who determines what the primary disability is?
That is through the IEP the evaluation process or the reevaluation process. Very similar to what we do for gifted students, where there's a multidisciplinary team that sits and takes a look at the evaluation report. For special education students, there is a team that sits and looks at their evaluation and reevaluation report as well. Usually a school psychologist, through a battery of testing and through parent input, interviews, so on and so forth, will draft a report. That report is then taken to a meeting where you have a multidisciplinary evaluation team, and that team then discusses whether or not what is in this report is what we agree to as a team. Sometimes suggestions are made to move things around. Recommendations might be suggested, additional testing might be suggested, or sometimes the team takes the report as is. So that typically comes out of that process.
Just thinking what it means to have a determination where the primary identifier for the child is a gifted identifier as opposed to an autism identifier or an emotional disturbance identifier.
And that is a very
That
interesting
is-
question, because me personally, in my long career now, because I'm getting older, we have struggled with that in different school districts because the primacy and the actual direction and directive from PDE and from Patan is if you have one of those 13 IDEA categorizations.
That comes first.
That comes first and that goes.
That's what
to
I'm hearing in the process, even that the gifted IEP goals are embedded in the IEP, the
Right.
larger IEP.
Correct.
And this is not something that Cheltenham necessarily can solve, but I imagine it plays out in very
It can play out.
illustrative cases that could help us really look at that process in a more driven way.
Yeah, and we oftentimes, you will see that it plays out in a multiplicity of ways. I think our school teams are pretty good at kind of sussing out what needs to be addressed, because when you think about a disability that requires specifically designed instruction, very similar to what you're seeing here, is one that you are trying to support a student with having access to everything that everybody else has access through by providing this special instruction to them, right? And giftedness oftentimes is the same way. How can you provide, well, the student already has access to the academics, but how can you provide access to what the student needs beyond what the baseline is for that particular age or grade?
Sure. Okay.
And thank you, Dr. Pimental, for sharing with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And welcome, Dr. Katrenbone, NT. And T. Steve Gian Vittorio and Ms. Pullum.
Not tonight. Close, not it. Let me get your answer.
Oh, I looked it up and I would have to verify it, but I believe we have 13 duly accepted.
Data.
It is.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Welcome.
Having us. All right, Dr. Pimental went over chapter 16 in the regs. I'm going to back up a little bit and go over chapter 14. All right, chapter 15 is 504s, but there won't be a quiz, I promise, afterwards. So chapter 14 deals with special education. You know, since I've been here with Misty, we want to lay the groundwork for what special education is for our community members and for our board. You've seen this before, but I'd like to just ground our discussion on what special ed is. And ironically, IDEA just turned 50 years old just last year. So it's 50 years in the making. Started off as the Education with Handicapped Act, and in 1990 switched over to what we now know as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. These are acronyms and terms that you may see thrown around child find MTSS parent requests. How does the process start? How do we suspect a child with a disability? We're obligated with child find. We work with the IU and other agencies in that area. Of course, you've heard about MTSS, which is not part of tonight's conversation, but we might get brought up from time to time because it encompasses everything we do. And then you heard about parent requests and gifted. We have those as well as special ed, chapter 14. There are evaluations that determine one of the 13 defined disabilities. Savage went over that as well when she talked about the giftedness, but we have the 13 disabilities. That with specially designed instruction on the right-hand side, which would be covered under goals, accommodations, and modifications, would then put together what we call the roadmap of the student's education program, the IEP. You've seen terms as free and appropriate public education is what we're offering. We have least restrictive environment is putting students in. It's not inclusion and it's not general ed. It could be, but LRE is about putting a student where they can be most successful. It might be a lot of time in special ed, might be not a lot of time in special ed. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll get into our community and educational partnerships on other slides. Just wanted to highlight them. The importance of parent, student, and teacher participation. And we'll be getting into that as well into our slides. This I wanted to highlight as well. Those of you, all of you, I think, were on the board when I first came. One of the things that my team and I looked over and said, we need a framework. MTSS is a framework. We have all these frameworks. Special ed itself needs a framework. So what we did was we did some research, and these are still our 4 tenets for special education. All of our special education students, we are of the mindset that they are given high quality standards aligned instructional resources. That's where we start. Okay, the IEP then tells us if we need to deviate from that. We use evidence-based practices. We have balanced system of assessments. Basically, that's a fancy way of saying we assess in different ways. Right? We observe them. There's informal, there's formal, there's project-based. It's any way we can get the student to tell us and show us what they know. And of course, without professional learning and collaboration, we can't do that. It's just constantly changing, and we're constantly updating our staff. All of our staff, administrators, paras, aides, teachers, of course, and then the collaboration of community partnerships, parents, and everybody else.
All right, so I'll start. So since my colleague, Ms. Pullen, couldn't be here, she's the supervisor for elementary. Since we shifted our model last year, our elementary consists of K-5, which is where our 4 elementary buildings house students K-5. So we serve 362 students with IEPs in those grade levels. On the slide, you'll see different points just to highlight things that are going on. Things I'd like to note is that as we've expanded with our autistic support program, you'll know because I was here like 3 years ago presenting on that, we actually now have supplemental autistic support in all of our elementary buildings. So it is not so much a student needing to be relocated to get the specialized program. They're offered in pretty much all elementary, actually now all of our buildings across the district. We still do have that more supplemental or higher level of support, emotional support at Cheltenham Elementary, as well as the higher support of life skills support at Glenside Elementary. So we are projecting right now about 47 students coming in from early intervention, and we are already in that planning process. Dr. Katrin has a whiteboard in his office and he puts numbers because we're number people in special ed. Data points are, I'm a data nerd. So, and so we're looking at the programming of what the projection is, and that helps determine like staffing for next year. Do we need to shift staff with their focus and what they are? We obviously have to meet the needs of the students. So looking at those 47 students coming in, what their needs are to help us drive our programming. Right now, there's about 20 students placed at a district, and these are students that their least restrictive environment is a more restrictive environment. And it's based off of their needs, not specifically their identification, but the needs that they have and can we program for them within district. It is our job to program for children to meet their needs, and we have to be realistic about when that's possible within our buildings. There's a couple other things on the right side to point out. So we started, Dr. Katrin brought in the special education coordinators, which are almost like a specum in Philly, anyone who knows Philly. It's kind of a point person within the building for special ed, which has been really helpful because there's not just everything me and Ms. Bolton can do all the time with all of our kids and all of our buildings. So we said 362 kids. So they are our point person in the buildings. We meet monthly with them. So we go over major topics for them to share out to their teachers. They can bring concerns to us so we can help problem solve up at the higher level. I think it's been really successful because it really helps people feel comfortable to go to their colleague to be able to then come share something to us. We have a teacher on assignment who is supporting our low ink programs. And I believe she started when she came in autistic support, but is now supporting all of our low ink K-5, Ms. McNally. And so then there's a couple other things that we'll point out later when it comes to like training and professional development. We have the Patent Autism Initiative that started about 3 years ago and now is in all of our autistic support classrooms. It's a really great program and really great support. We had a couple teachers last summer go through Wilson certification as just another tier of intervention for students who have reading needs. And then there's a couple different instructional and intervention programs that we utilize at this level. Just pointing out that when we meet in May, we're going to be giving you guys, I know last Board of Ed meeting for special ed focused a lot on those intervention programs because we obviously invested them. May is when we're going to bring that data more to the table just because of it gives you pretty much the expanded the year to see that growth. Midpoint, you can't see the full picture when you're looking in February. So we're going to bring that when we come back to the table in May. So do you want to?
I just want to highlight, there's 47 early intervention students. That number fluctuates. All 47 may not come. They're given the option to stay in early intervention another year. Some of them may move just, because a lot of times I know teachers and administrators see that. You do the math, you're thinking that 12 to 15 kids are coming in with IEPs. That's not always the case. If they're developmentally delayed, we also are obligated to evaluate them again to determine if they qualify for a school age disability. Some of them may not.
So then the secondary level, that is grades 6 through 12. We serve 555 students. Once again, some just points of specialized programs. We have emotional support supplemental in all of our buildings. As the students get older, and I'll talk about it later when we talk about disabilities. So disabilities don't drive programming. So some students have blended programming. And so our autistic support and life skills support typically work all hand in hand together to kind of program, once again, to meet the students' needs. We have about approximately 22 students who are receiving 12 plus programming. So I don't know if you guys remember about a year and a half ago, new things came out from the state to point out that the way that the law is written, people before were programming for students up until the end of the school year of their 21st year. But the way it's written is ambiguous. So because of that now, coming from the state, programming goes up to the day before your 22nd birthday. So we do have students who have already aged out of schooling this year, could be like October 12th. They could be just a random day. They go to the day before. The IP team had that conversation because some parents do feel like that awkward break is not appropriate for their child. So they have the ability to stay up until the day before their 22nd birthday, but some choose to make a cleaner break, Christmas break, spring break, things like that. Same with, we have about 30 students at a place at a district at the secondary level. Similar to elementary, we have coordinators in the middle school or in Cedarbrook East, and then we have department chairs in Cedarbrook and the high school. We also have a transition coordinator. So secondary transition is that planning for a student starting at the age of 14 up to what are they doing after high school. So for some kids, that looks like after their 4 biological years. For some kids, it's after their 12 plus years. And that covers education, employment, and independent living. And she's been doing a lot of great things, which I'll highlight on one of the later slides too. Amanda Roman's our transition coordinator. Wilson certifications, we have 2. And then once again, a list of different instructional and intervention programs we use at secondary. So this actually ties to what Dr. Katcherman talked about before with like MTSS sliding in. So we wanted to point out initial evaluations, whether it's a request or a student going through the MTSS process. In the ideal world, that number of 62 is equal to the number of identified students. That means ideal world, we did MTSS completely correct. We supported students to not have to identify them. The 62 to 50 is very close, right? And I wanted to highlight that because of the work that the MTSS teams are doing with Diane Rodriguez, who was sitting at this table last year, who is now the supervisor of MTSS. They're doing a lot of work to making sure that we're not over-identifying kids, because that obviously is one of the biggest concerns across this. How many kids do we need to identify with disabilities? And then the other number on the bottom is just the number of functional behavior assessments. So you'll see, if you looked in those last 2 slides about BCBAs, they're board certified behavior analysts. They conduct FBAs, which are functional behavior assessments, a lot of letters, specialized like alphabet soup. So they conduct these assessments to determine if a student has a behavior that impedes their learning or the learning of others. That's what would rise them to the level of a positive behavior support plan, which is then connected with their IEP.
I just want to point out this data, and I'm going to go back a couple slides. When you see the interventions down here, the programs that we use, we talked about this before. That's legislate approve the purchase of these programs. ILIT, iReady, all these interventions that we put into place last year, and now we're about a year and a half in. All of this data is going to be put together and shared during our May affairs meeting. Last year at this time, we put this data into graphs and spreadsheets and everything and shared it with you. We're only halfway through the year. We just thought it'd be better to have all the data, so we're going to do that in May.
All right, so like I said, we're data nerds here, so we like to break down what we're looking like at a glance for the district. So looking, you'll see our numbers for autism. So as pointed out before, there's 13 disability categories in IDEA. And they're disability categories and their identifications, not diagnosis. And I've heard a lot of our sites really work on trying to change that language because we're not diagnosing kids with things, we're identifying students. And most of those disabilities have prongs to identify them. So if you're going to be identified with autism, these are the prongs that you're hitting, which is separate from just the prongs of special ed in order to be identified as needing an IEP. So you'll see our numbers across the district, as well as the percent of the special ed population that has that disability. Something that's not on the slide, but I just wanted to point out, I researched what the state averages are as well, because I thought somebody might ask. And so when looking at it, our numbers or our percent for autism were a little bit higher by 4.4%. Intellectual disability was a little bit higher by 0.4%. Specific learning disability was a little bit higher with 3.2%. Our combined, because it is a very low incidence population, we combined hearing impairment with including deafness, visual impairment, including blindness, orthopedic impairment, and traumatic brain injury, because if you know 15 is a very, very small number. We were 0.6 above the state average, and then multiple disabilities, we were 0.4 above the state average. And like I said, I sat at this table a couple years ago when we brought in autistic support, and from when we talked at that point, we were at about 1 out of 36 kids were identified with autism. We're now at 1 out of 31, so the numbers continuously, which is why noting that our autism numbers are a little bit higher, that is because that is the trend. And also we have to keep in mind move-ins and things like that, right? So these numbers sometimes fluctuate depending on, we have a lot of kids transfer into the district. So it's noting that some of those kids come in with IEPs or some come in and then we identify them. So those are like the only major discrepancies. Everywhere else we were below what the state average is.
And this is the primary.
And this is primary. So yes, it's also important to note that these are not. Yeah. There's about 460 students who have co-occurring disabilities, meaning they could have autism as well as another health impairment, or they could have an emotional disturbance as well as a specific learning disability. So we have about 460 students who have more than one disability category identified. And so we disaggregated the data a little bit and broke it down, looking at the primary disability, looking at it by race as well as gender. So you'll note the first number in the chart is the total number. The number in parentheses is the percent from total students. And then
total IEP students. So if we can get, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
You look at the students, so the 22% there in that category of students, 82 students who are Black, specific learning disabled, that's 22%, that's 82 of the 362, not the 72% total elementary students that we have.
And then the last number that.
And the 4240 is male, female?
Yep, that's what I was about to say. The first number on that, let's call it almost like a fraction, is male, and the second number is female. If you see an asterisk, because that means the value was less than 5 or less than 1%. And so that's where you'll see that a couple times across the chart as well.
When I did this, I just want to note that I rounded the percentages. If it happened to be like 2.5, which I don't think is here, I would have left it at 2.5. But if it was 0.6, I just rounded up. If it was 0.4 below, I rounded it, just for simplicity. So this, I don't pause for general questions, but I just want to make sure this makes sense, because if you need time to really digest it, this was added on. I told Ms. Blitzstein, this was added on over the weekend before we had our preview. Because we're going to see secondary as well, and we can go back. of give everybody a chance to really look at it. Good to move on. We can go back. I can always go back. Thank you. And again, this is secondary, so 555 total students. This is 6 to 12 now. I gotta get into that mindset, right? That we're K-5 and 6 to 12 now. So 6 to 12, we have 23.7%. The state as of 24-25 is about 20.7%. So we were right about there for elementary. We're a little bit higher overall with our identification secondary. And a lot of that does happen because we do get a lot of move-ins that come in like 8th and 9th grade. But 555 total students with an IEP at our secondary level, 6 to 12. And you can see the numbers there as far as the breakdown of their race, ethnicity, along with their primary category. Obviously, because of what Ms. D said on the other slides, we didn't break down like our low, like the traumatic brain injury, the FRD hearing. There's like 0 students or 1 student in those categories. We're good. Thank you. I always can go back. Thank you.
And so this next slide breaks down our numbers for programming. I like to emphasize that identification does not drive programming. So a child with autism doesn't need to get autistic support. So this is for primary, so students can receive more than one type of programming. So our numbers are solely based off of their primary programming type, with our highest at the district being for learning support. And then obviously our lowest is multiple disability support, as well as those grouped together additional supports. Support can range from itinerant, which is like your lowest level of support, supplemental, or full-time.
Yeah, and if you are familiar with an IEP, on the IEP towards the end is where you will check off this level of support. You can check off more than one, but this is their primary level of support. And PDE defines this, and it's in earlier presentations, like it's very clear a child that needs learning support is primarily in autistic support, sensory behavior, communication, emotional support, regulation, coping, and all that. So it's very clearly defined.
So we've been trying to be really targeted this year when it comes to, not that we don't always, but professional development for our staff. So these are some examples that what the staff have worked on. We really have dived deeply this year into looking at process and procedures, myself and Ms. Fulham, as well as our document writing. When you write a clear document, programming can be more clear for those who are implementing it. So we've been looking at the development of IEPs, case management and student cases conversations. I always say that it's great to bring a bunch of bright minds to the table because sometimes that is the best that you can come up with. I've had really good conversations with the high school of teachers coming together to just talk. And it's great to see the passion people have for children. So some web content accessibility things, which is rolling in 2027, that we'll start to see things around the Danielson cluster because our teachers are evaluated similarly to everybody else. So it's important for them to understand what that looks like in that process. As well as we've had a lot of programmatic training that have come with those programs that we use, like iReady, STAR, as well as some training specific to some of our specialty subgroups, like our BCBs, working on Relias, as well as our psychs, getting opportunities to review reports and participate in trainings as well. Some of them have participated in different trainings for specific tests because the assessments vary for different areas that we are looking at for a child. So some of them, like within the last year or so, some have gotten trained in the ADOS, which is an autism assessment, which has like specialties to its assessment itself. And then, so those are, like I said, some examples of the staff development we've offered. And then doing the next slide, paraprofessional, which has been, I know a question that's come up in the past and it's near and dear to my heart. So myself and Ms. McNally, who is the teacher on assignment, have been focusing this year a lot on that paraprofessional development. Actually, just on Friday, they came in. It was lovely. It was very wonderful. Because I think in the past, the pairs have just not felt like they've been heard in the meeting. And so happen to be working on a dissertation on paraprofessional training, which has been where my passion's been a lot, and noting that they're important, right? They're in the law. That's what I told them that already. I was like, you're in the law. You're a related service to a student. So we need to know that they are trained just like our professionals working with these students. So they've received a lot of different training areas. Melissa Williams, who is the administrative assistant to Dr. Catchermone, works all the logistics. So she tracks, like, they need 20 hours of professional development every year for the state. And she's phenomenal with all the spreadsheets she has. Are crazy. And so she's been also going over that with staff. So it's easier for them to understand what their expectations within their roles. So expectations, onboarding, reviewing IEPs, because they too should be able to access the IEPs of the students they work with, because they are the ones implementing the plan. Dr. Hatchenbrone's favorite line is that they're living, breathing SDI, right? They are the ones who need to make sure that that stuff is happening. And so it's good to note that they know what these documents say and know how to read them, which has been really helpful. Like I said, they were very passionate on Friday when we were talking about this. Some of them we've offered an opportunity to be RBT as a registered behavior technician. And so it's more specialty around behavior, so we can support those students with bigger behaviors. And so a couple of them have elected to do the opportunities that we've offered as a district to go through the training process and take the assessment so they can be a more highly certified paraprofessional. We've had paras who are part of those autistic support classrooms also engage in the autism initiative trainings that are offered. We do a lot around verbal de-escalation and supporting behaviors, because once again, a lot of the times paraprofessionals, being what their role is focusing on supporting students' behaviors, right? They're not instructional aides, they are not certified teachers, but they support a lot around behavior. So it could be redirection, could be kids who elope, it could be kids who need de-escalation support. So they've had a lot of training in those areas as well as some health and safety things, and then also continuing learning and utilize the platform master teacher, which offers some virtual learning opportunities that staff have had the ability to participate in ones that we've assigned, as well as pick ones out that align to what their roles are on their day-to-day.
I know we're biased. We always say our special ed staff is one of the hardest working groups in the district, but I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight our powers here. Steve did. It is amazing. In fact, we just had our 7th certified RBT come through today. So 7 of our district powers are now RBT certified. And it's amazing the dedication they have. These are just some of our educational partnerships we wanted to highlight. We're always working with their Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. They have a TAC team, training and consultation. We recruit related service providers, psychologists, even BCBA assistants from them in training. Jackie already highlighted the TAN, Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, I think, if I got that acronym right. They've been in our autistic support classes at the elementary level now for 3 years. In most of the classes, it's year 1 for some of the classes this year because they're new. Their role is to come in every month and consult and observe and look at data and just give recommendations to the team and to the teachers. And then it is our job. I would be Shannon McNally, who you've heard her name. Dr. Beasley is a BCBA that most of you are familiar with. She is the internal coach and works with Shannon. So they're the ones that are on the ground each and every day connecting with those teachers and those teams. We work with pediatric therapy services and hostels. They provide us our OTs. We do not have district hired OTs. We do recruit some registered behavior technicians from them as well. They're good, but they're a little costly, but this is why we wanted to get our district powers who could do some of the same work, the certification, because some of them are already doing that work. And so that's been the balance. We're very blessed to be able to have that. And then we work with HR, because our need for paraprofessionals has increased, and we just don't have powers that are coming in and interviewing for these. So we do have to use our agencies as well. And of course, we still have the extent which you've heard through the MTSS process as well. All right. So my 3rd year, this is year 3 that we have collected. The questions or the statements that the parents provide this feedback on is actually the statements and questions that are on the compliance monitoring. So when we get audited by the state every 6 years, these are very similar, if not the same questions. The way to read this, and I'm sorry for the numbers, how they didn't all line up like in those columns all the way down to the bottom. Thank you, Ms. Blitzstein. I switched it over for reading left to right here. You want to read this as you see the blue is often or all the time. So there's 5 categories they could check off. All the time, often, and then sometimes. And then, of course, they could say rarely or never. The blue highlights the often or all the time. And then down below, you look at there and you say, I feel I am an equal partner with teachers and other professionals in planning my child's program. 2024, 2025, 2026, you can see where we landed. Next one would be at my child's IEP meetings, we discuss accommodations and modifications. You see there 91, 94, 93, so that's been fairly consistent. All my concerns and recommendations are documented on the IEP. 82 went up to 87, went back down to 83. And then here we had a lot of work to do from 2024, which we still have a lot of work to do. IEP meetings, given information about organizations that offer support for parents of students with disabilities. So we have, we do send out a newsletter every month, every other month. We have updated our website, but I think it's more touch points. I think it's more in person, like when they're actually at the meeting and really showing them, is something we got to get better at. But I'm very happy that we're not at 36% anymore like we were 2 years ago, but we still have a lot of work to do. I've been asked my opinion about how well my special education. I mean, we dipped a little bit, but I mean, we're not back at that 30% we got. I apologize. I should have added. In 2024, we had 142 respondents. In 2025, we had 127 respondents. And this past year, we had 156. Really went up. It meant, and I got that honestly because I think the last couple of years I sent 3 reminders, like 1 a week. This year I went a 4th. A lot of times when I send out a reminder to the parents and it's right there on their phone, it's right there at their laptop, and they go, you know what? Now I have 5 minutes to fill this out. They do it.
And I just also noted something you brought up the other day, which is that 150 something compared to our 900 students with IEPs. Some parents have multiple students with disabilities, so they may have only filled the form out once. So that 156 does reflect a lot more families than what looks like our numbers of students.
Yeah, we're up close to 900 students total with IEPs. I would say that probably comes out to about 650 families. So it's almost a 25% return rate on the survey, which is amazing. This was another one that, even though it was 81%, we wanted to make sure that child's evaluation reports and information is written in terms they understand. I'll be honest, I don't think if what's written is necessarily changed. I think it's better. Parents are feeling more comfortable to ask those questions in the moment. Yeah, and the PD too, the professional development they're getting. We talk about, I think somebody else mentioned, like coming in and being not understanding the programs. That's one of the things. Like, do they understand the programs and materials? So we got some work to do on there. We bumped up those since 2 years ago. And then you read this one as at my school, teachers and administrators, and you can just fill in the blank. Seek parental input. You can see we were low, went up, dipped a little bit. These are the two I think really tell a good story here. You know, we have show sensitivity to the needs. That went up. It dipped a little bit from last year to this year, but it went up from 2024. And this one here, respecting cultural heritage, 84% to 91, and then the next slide. Always work, always move and grow, and always work to do. Same thing here. You read it from the top. At my school, teachers and administrators offer parents a variety of ways to communicate. That went up, dipped a little bit from last year to this year. Gives parents the help they may need to play an active role. That went up, dipped a little bit from last year to this year. Provide information on agencies. So it's kind of the same type of question. 42 went up to 58, dipped a little bit. And then this one went up pretty well here. Explain what options parents have if they disagree with the decision at school. One of the things we stressed is make parents feel comfortable that they can disagree. They can ask for an informal meeting, right? They can also check off mediation or due process rather than just saying, you know, here's your norm, and here are your procedure safeguards. If you've ever got a copy of the procedure safeguards, they're online now, but in person they were both with it. Parents used to tell me they had so many of them they could wallpaper their fabric with it. And it's also written in very fine print. And, you know, again, we would be remiss if we didn't honor, you know, and recognize our support with Special Education Alliance of Cheltenham, representatives here tonight. We don't meet as regularly, but we check in. And I think that not meeting as regularly is not because we don't want to meet, it's because the communication has been very open and transparent. When we do check in, it's a very cordial and awesome conversation of give and take. We've been advertising things for them. They've been advertising that big email today about people, hey, come out tonight, be online, check this out. It came from their group. And then I just recently was connected with the UPG, I think I mentioned earlier, talking about students as they come in, all students, and how they come in and how they are welcomed into the district, what information are given. Having been a former building principal, I had a different lens, or I had a lens of that, as well as being a special ed director, because students coming in, as Jackie mentioned, when they come in from another district with an IEP, and that IEP should translate, but we need to help the parent understand exactly how that IEP is going to translate, because it might look a little different, and we want parents feel comfortable with that change. And then I'll let Jackie highlight. I mean, just wow, has she been knocking it out of the park?
Yeah, our transition coordinator. So there's a section in the IEP called secondary transition, which some people might breeze over, but it's really important because we really do need to start backtracking early on for students and where they go next. And so our transition coordinator will go to IEP meetings, either when she's invited or specific cases. And since then, and a lot of the work she's been doing this year and towards last year when she started, developing and sharing teams guiding documents for sports coordination. So that's a way for parents and families to receive support following post-secondary for students, typically students with those low incidence like intellectual disabilities or autistic autism spectrum disorder. So she's been developing documents and being able to share it out. So parents have numbers and emails and links to click on so they can reach out. She's been developing and sharing with teams guiding documents for community program opportunities. So there's a lot of things that like parents are like, when my kid leaves school, what can they do? Right. And so she's been doing a lot of coordinating that and finding stuff to be able to share out with people of these opportunities, because there's a lot in Montgomery County. And so it's making sure parents know that. And so she's been sharing it with teams so that teams can share it with their families. Setting up information tables. So we had report card conferences. She has sat at a nice little table in the high school right outside the main office to share out flyers and information and to answer questions. And then if parents have further questions about secondary transition, she's been scheduling meetings with families or parents to talk through things, to support them with sports coordination application, all of OVR, all of those things. She's been meeting with families that have requested it. So it's just another opportunity for parents who are seeking additional support and understanding that she is another resource that we offer here.
Office of Vocational Outreach.
Oh, I'm sorry. Office of Vocational Rehabilitations, OVR. Sorry.
Well, we tend to throw out acronyms.
I try to catch them all tonight. I missed that one.
Yeah. And then I just put at the bottom again, our special ed department does send out a s'mores newsletter. I need to actually send one out again soon. I don't think I sent one out. I think the last one I sent out was in December. And that I think has been a big hit. S'mores, as you know, tracks it. I mean, I send it out and it's right at your fingertips. Usually about an hour later, I get, it just got its 50th view. And then 3 hours later, or at the end of the day, it's got 100 views. So it's getting some traction. But we just need that continued partnership between the board, between our parents of what information we want to include, how we want to communicate that. And again, I want to go back and say that with the support of the board and with everything that you've helped us do and all the resources that we have, we will be highlighting that. Yeah. All right. That's not my bedtime alarm. But it's we are going to highlight the data that came from the intervention programs more explicitly in our. And I think that
Board comments and questions. Ms. Bliss.
Yeah, that was. I do have a question about slide 46. And my question is, do these? Yeah, sorry, I'll wait till we get there.
Where's the numbers for it?
It's district programming at a glance.
Oh, there you go.
What's that?
A district programming at a glance is what it was. No, programming, keep going. The other direction.
The other direction.
Leading tech to him is fun.
Well, if I could see a number, do you see a number?
After that.
Keep going down. There you go. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, so do these include our out of district cases?
Yes.
Okay. So then my next question is, do we currently serve any deaf or hard of hearing students in our district?
So if we have students who need typically itinerant level of hearing or visual support, we do program within district. We work with the IU, who then has specialists in those areas that we don't have a hearing teacher. So specialists in those areas who come in and service typically our retired districts. So Emily Hagan is our hearing and Missy Garber is our vision support teachers. So yes, typically if it's an itinerant level. If it is a higher level, there's probably a consideration for a more restricted environment.
God, I was just wondering if we had like interpreters, sign language interpreters, or anybody that was currently either on staff or being contracted currently.
Yeah, I think at the elementary level, we have one
We have one
student.
Yeah, the number is very low.
Okay, I just used to be a former regular ed teacher teaching also inclusion with a teacher of deaf. I mean, had 35 kids bind together, but it was a really amazing thing to watch our hearing kids and our deaf kids learn and reach. Anyway, so my other question is, and I don't know if you can answer this right now, if you have this data, so this could be for a later time, but would you say more students are entering school in kindergarten or first grade from early intervention with IEPs now than say 10 years ago / pre-COVID? And I ask just because as a former elementary school teacher, I love to try to support kids as early as possible so that we don't delay in closing gaps that could be closed. And so I'm just wondering if we're looking at 47 incoming kids with already from early intervention, which to me sounds great. I don't know, just that they've already been identified and theoretically receiving services prior to coming to us puts them at an advantage to kids who have yet to be identified and received. So I'm just wondering if you've seen those numbers change or if there's a trend over.
I'll have to get that for you.
Okay.
I can tell you that just off the top of my head, it has an increase from last year. Only because I'm picturing my whiteboard from this year. It's actually gone down a little bit.
Okay.
I think it was in the 50s, somewhere in the range last year. On my way through. But that would be interesting because I know we probably have that information somewhere in a Google Doc. I just messaged probably.
Thank you.
But that's
She's listening
interesting
now if you just ask her.
She probably is. She's probably looking it up right now.
She probably is.
But I can look at it. That's interesting. Now you got me curious. I'm gonna. Thank you.
Other board comments and questions?
Thanks. I feel like a part of the conversation from earlier, we can apply to this around identification and like over identification. And so I guess one part of it is, are there best practices that are happening similar to that for this? And then are there unique reasons? Because obviously we know part of that is a national issue around over identification of students who are Black and Black boys as well. But I wonder if there's like something unique in Cheltenham that we understand doing something about as well.
Well, I think a lot of our sites are definitely engaged in like cultural responsiveness when it comes to training and whatnot. I think it's helpful that some of these assessments do have like indicators of, especially around emotional disturbance, around indicators of like escalated scores of like how not relevant, but how valid is this score comparatively. Because I know I'm close with the psych at the high school, and so I would say that looking at a district, we're actually lower than the state average when it comes to emotional disturbance. Yes, over-representation of a specific, race within it, but we are lower than the state too within that race as well. So Black boys, but I do agree that there is that concern around over-identification. So I think our psychs being part of that team of people who are looking at the data, having them be like up to date with like cultural responsiveness is definitely a big part of moves that we've made as a district.
And I think prior to that special ed piece being overseeing MTSS as well, that's where a lot of that comes into play. Even before that, also, I think one of the things that Savage and I are co-chairing is the Debbie, the diversity, equity, and belonging and inclusion. I think a lot of that for awareness needs to come through that as well, because this would be all steps and interventions that occur prior. And once the child is going through the evaluation process, to what Jackie just spoke about, is once they're in the evaluation process, that's where the psychologist then looks at all those indicators. But I think it's the preventive measures that prior. Yeah. Without a doubt.
With board comments and questions. Slow.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for that question, Zachary, because I want to piggyback on that a little bit. Like, I'm looking at the district disabilities at a glance by subgroup secondary. If I'm reading this right, 32% of our secondary ed students with IEPs are Black students with specific learning disabilities.
Right here.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's a very high number. A very high number, 32%. That I am wondering if I wonder about that. I wonder how we've gotten there. I wonder how those kids are, what type of instruction they're receiving, what type of specially designed instruction that they're receiving. How many of those are our kids who are ninth graders who repeated 3 times? I'm very curious about that group of kids. That's a high number. And then also to see, but only 26 white kids in all of secondary ed have learning disabilities. That's also like statistically impossible. Unless.
I keep sliding back.
There's 4 white kids in this district at secondary level who have learning disabilities.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna say some things right now that I think are, that when we are at the UPG presentation next week, we probably won't be able to meet some of this data out. But I think we have to really think about, as a district, the longitudinal data. How many of these students start with us, and how many of them are ours from kindergarten on up? Because what we are actually seeing is at different break points, and this is why the reconfiguration was so important. We would see that we have a lot of white flight out of our schools, in middle school and high school, which then drives your proportions differently, right? And we also know for a clear fact that our proportion of special education students at the K-5 level is smaller than it is at the high school level for the same reason. Mr. Swigert and I looked at some data from the 2020 census tract a while back, and we actually are missing about 2,000 children that live in this township from our district schools. So there is a lot of question there, because private schools do not have to actually report who is attending those schools or where they're attending. So there's a lot of question around, the historical analysis of where have these students gone? How many did we lose over the pandemic? Because we know we lost about 100 at least that went into charter schools and cyber charter schools. And then where are these students coming from? And how many of these students actually are bringing, are coming to us with disability services already in place?
We just got that one data point that thus far this year, we've already had 87 move-ins with IMPs. I mean, so.
At the high school?
Oh, this
So,
So.
And it's an extremely mobile population.
I think it's also important, and you're looking at relative, right? I think we're in the high 50s to 60% of Black children at the high school.
Correct. 53% when I ran the numbers last week. 53% of the students at the high school are African American. So when you look at the actual demographics and disproportionality, it gives you a different picture.
There's 25%, I think, 25-20 district overall.
A little less than 25
Is
also.
it dipped?
Yeah, and we have seen an increase in the percentage of students that are multiracial, a decrease in the students that are identifying themselves as Asian. So our numbers have definitely diversified in terms of the demographics, and we see more and more students who, are identifying as students of color, especially at that secondary level. And it is, even when you walk through the buildings, it is visible.
So, I'm sorry.
No.
I just sort of a little bit to follow up on that, but more often, like my sort of other big question about some of this is something that was only sort of briefly mentioned. 2 things, but one was which was not mentioned at all, but one which was is least restrictive environment. I mean, I'd really love to see sort of, you know, the breakdown of sort of where our students are located, you know, how if it changes between elementary and secondary, like that kind of thing. And I'm also really interested in the discipline data for our kids with IEPs. We don't see that. We see that. Okay, yeah, I'd be really curious to see. Yeah, what that looks like. But LRE, I mean, I've sat through a lot of these meetings now, even back before I was on the board, and we used to get a lot of, that was one of the biggest issues for the state flag for us, for this district, was the kind of restrictiveness of our placements. And I'm just curious to see sort of where we're at this point.
I can pull that for you
Okay.
because we're off that list.
Okay, all right, that's.
I do know that because
Okay.
we had when I came in, we had just come out of compliance monitoring.
Okay.
I had to follow up on a few things. But our LRE is, and I understand so you're looking at that.
Yeah, those sort of the breakdown.
Those
But
indicators that the state reports out on, or I can get that for us. Yeah.
Because the other thing that we did this year in particular, when we put together the elementary school schedules, we looked at the instructional blocks, and we actually have more students that are fully included in instructional blocks because of how we set the instructional block up. So students are actually losing less time being exposed to grade level curriculum because the way the instructional blocks, particularly for math and for ELA, are set up is we gave the teachers a structure around how long they should be teaching, whole group, how students should be included in small group, and then when students could be pulled for special education or intervention or extension supports and services, so that students wouldn't be missing so much of that grade level instruction, because that's where, you know, that LRE question comes in. So over the course of the year, we've been seeing that the IEPs are adjusting now. I just thought that would be a helpful.
yeah, that is really helpful, because it's, I mean, you could do a presentation on just on LRE.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, I mean,
Absolutely.
and about supplementary aid services and how we're using assistive technology, and I mean, there's like a million things to be doing with that. And I'm glad to hear that I know that we're out of the state, but I'm also just really interested in best practices and kind of where we are on that.
Yeah, and even like supporting the teachers and renorming their lexicon around like what kind of instruction. We have been heavily focused on grade level instruction and differentiation this year. And also, you know, we're getting into the later part of the year where we're going to start talking about scaffolds, because what does it mean to meet a child where they are and then scaffold your instruction up? Because the conversations I've had with the principals and with the teachers are around the fact that we create our own gaps by how we actually are setting up our master schedules. So we have been adjusting those over the course of the 18 months.
And I go back to this slide because I know you and I sometimes finish each other sentences, you know, and that's why when we developed our framework and we do have handbooks. I don't think I mentioned that, but I think we talked about it. We do have handbooks for each of those areas. We've been reading documents that we're constantly updating, but that's why we're starting with number one up here, to your point, for all students. See what they can do and how they can function, given the grade level. Everything, behavior, social, emotional, and academics.
Other board comments, questions? Questions and comments from the public, anybody in the room? Besides.
Esther Isaac again. First of all, I wanted to thank you both for the presentations. This was very helpful. I had, as a parent who had a GIEP and IEP meeting today, this was like perfect timing as we're trying to learn.
Busy day.
Yeah. But this is very helpful. So I want to thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'm only going to ask two for the interest of time. So the first question is, so for a child who's in like a specifically autistic support classroom, so I'm thinking of Myers, that's where my son attends, classroom, mixed age level children. If they're moving from that setting into a general education setting with supports, but they're currently receiving like the program from Patton, like training from the Patton program, do they forfeit that? Or is there a way that they still can move into gen ed with supports and have access to the pattern education that would have normally taken place in that structured setting?
So the pattern is working with the classroom environment and the teacher and the staff. It's not necessarily, they're not working directly with the students. The students, IEP, your student or any student's IEP is what drives their program.
Are you asking more
So
about the
not-
curriculum that's used? Like,
One way I would hear your question.
So
Are the teachers and the classrooms in the gen ed environment structured according to the same kinds of guidance that Patton is giving the autistic support class?
Yes, so like currently,
Here comes.
we had a conversation today at his IEP that we are really hoping that he can transition into gen ed with supports, because based on the feedback that we've gotten, we think that it's definitely worth a shot so that he is in the restricted environment. However, in his current classroom setting, which is it's very short, yes, he resigned the patent, so it's something to think about that we discussed that where the patent fits into his scheduling, if he moves into gen ed, that may be impacted. So is there a way?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yes, it might just be a decision where we decide if we had to choose, we still want to pursue gen ed, but I'm just wanting to know in those, like there was a list of like programs and patent was one of them that kind of supports.
I know exactly what you're talking
Okay.
about. So, I mean, and we can talk after this as well, because I don't want to take the public for your child's private information.
Right.
But some of it is dependent upon which classroom.
Okay.
Because over at Myers, we have a couple of different autistic support classrooms, and we also have different programming that is available to students, and some students already have blended programming. Part of that is going to be dependent upon what your child actually needs and requires, because when we say patent program, patent actually comes in and sets up our teachers to support students that are on the spectrum using a number of different curricula, but most significantly what's called VB-MAP. And the VB-MAP program in particular is set up so that it fills the language gaps for kids that are on the spectrum that they might be missing from like ages 0 to 3. So you'll see a lot of manding, a lot of tacting, where they prompt students to ask questions and to describe what they need. And once those language gaps are filled, then they are now moving into other curriculum that we have brought this year, including like Touch Math, Teach Town, STAR, so that those students and then get the next level of that like pre-K readiness skill, and then they move next into the general ed set. What you will see is that we provide supplemental support services at Myers, but the students are then included for other parts of the day that are not necessarily academic. So they might be included for music, for art, for gym, for recess. They go outside, play with the kids. So that part of their world is where they get the socialization, because they are fully included for those pieces, and their paraeducators and their support will go with them into those general education settings. So I think as part of your IEP meeting process, when you sit down and you kind of talk through what that looks like, you will get more information around that. And it's going to be great, like being in this role and working with the special education department, because part of what I'll be doing as director of teaching and learning is supporting that curriculum. Really looking at like what the curriculum spread looks like, where we need to plug in new curriculum, how we actually pay for it. So, okay, absolutely. But if you want to talk afterwards, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'll stay.
And exactly, second question, are we over time?
Please.
Thank you, that was very helpful, by the way, and I appreciate you guys, yes, okay. So the second question has to do with inclusion. I know that there's a big push for inclusion as much as possible. So this can apply to students in autistic supports or just in general. What data does the district collect on time that the students spent with age-matched peers that are non-disabled? And if they do collect that data, how is that used to guide placement decisions or trends for students coming in?
Students coming in.
Like into the district, like is it used to guide decisions? So for example, a child who's in autistic supports might push in, like we said, at specials, or they might push in at core curriculum like English, math, reading. Is that actually measured? Do they collect data on how long the student spent with age-matched peers that are not?
That's the data
That's the LRE data that Ms. Thurman was referring to. Yeah, our goal is to get children to access gen ed environment curriculum, okay, with accommodations. And so we want to remove those barriers so that they can access that. If they can't access that and need more explicit teaching in the social area, behavioral, and academic area, that's when you may see the IEP team shift to a smaller group of direct instruction in any one of those skill deficits that they have. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I think we should talk, I have your name here, but I want to talk to you about offline, so I can look at their paperwork.
Thank you.
Other public comments? I also see no red dots.
No red.
Schultz, are you up?
Took a bathroom break.
With that, thank you, Ms. DiGiantorio and Dr. Catron for your contributions tonight. Thank you, Dr. Pimental and Dr. Savage as well for your ongoing going back and forth. You got your steps in. Congratulations. And with that, I will entertain a motion.
Sorry, hold on.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, sorry. Well, it's really quick. It's not even it's a question for May, but I wanted to tell you the question now.
Yeah.
Because I heard some things around staffing, some things around training. And so depending on the date of our meeting, we're gonna be deciding on a budget for the following year. And so like which resources and if possible, like what resources you're asking us to approve and things like that would be helpful to kind of understand that in May.
Oh, yeah.
So we're really beginning to say.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks.
And I will move to adjourn the meeting.
Second, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.